Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We have a great group for our monthly gallery program, 3 and 30. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Izzy Fuqua. I'm the Adult Programs Coordinator for the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and I'm delighted to be joined by Barry Shifman, the Sydney and Frances Lewis Family Curator of Decorative Arts, 1890 to the present. He is joining us today to discuss 3 exciting recent acquisitions to the Decorative Arts collection. I got a little sneak peek last week, and let me tell you, they are something special. So I'm really excited for you to get to see them as well. So with that, Barry, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Izzy, and welcome everyone. Good morning. I'm excited to talk about 3 recent acquisitions that I hope you'll find interesting. So we could start now. You haven't seen this work because it's not yet on view. We acquired this magnificent tureen tray and ladle made by the Fabergé firm. We acquired it just last September. And I'm thrilled about it because it really is one of the most important pieces of Fabergé silver in the Neo-Russian or Old Russian style, made in Moscow, now in the United States. It is, as you see, a lidded tureen, which is on a tray, and it has its ladle. And it's silver with amethyst, chrysoprase, chalcedony, and garnets, these gemstones. And it's really in this very unusual early 20th century style. You see the swan's handles with the what looks like peacock leaves on the tureen, peacock feathers, algae below the tureen, algae motifs, curvilinear motifs. On the lid, you see porpoises. And then at the top, this Cyrillic initial. And we think this might have been a marriage celebration gift or celebrating some sort of wedding anniversary. And it's big, it's about 25 inches tall. And it's very, very rare to have this silver still intact, because obviously in the early 20th century, many of the treasures, particularly from the Fabergé firm and elsewhere in Russia, were seized by the Bolshevik government, sold to get hard currency or melted down. So to find silver of this magnificence still intact is very rare. And as I said earlier, it's in a style that we associate with the Moscow workshops of Fabergé, rather than the firm's more traditional European style of neoclassicism that you'd find in St. Petersburg. And so this shows what they called at that time Neo-Russian or Old Russian Moscow style. And it was a style that was popular with the newly rich and other people in Russia who wanted this style that looked back to Russia's illustrious past, or the Romanov past, the Romanov dynasty starting in the 1600s. I think we have a detail, yes. So you see there the gemstones and this wonderful decoration. You see at the top with the lid, the porpoises, the swan handles, and these geometric motifs. They're really looking to decorative motifs or ornamental forms seen in 16th, 17th century Russian paintings or manuscripts or architecture. So we're very excited about this piece of silver, which will go on view shortly in the Old Russian Moscow style gallery within the Fabergé workshops. What's interesting is this soup tureen had actually been owned for 30 or 40 years by Sidney and Frances Lewis of Richmond, Virginia. They had bought the tureen from Sotheby's London in 1970, and a day after the sale, Sotheby's was able to offer them the tray and ladle, which had been separated from the tureen. And it had been on view here a few years ago, only for 3 months. And so we were very, very fortunate to be able to acquire it. And as I say, it's probably the most important Fabergé piece of Moscow silver now in America. Another piece that we bought recently is this splendid, truly splendid choker. It goes around a woman's neck as a decorative necklace, if you will. It's called a choker. We acquired this last June. It is on view in the Art Nouveau gallery, and I urge you to come look at it. It really is the most important piece of Belgian Art Nouveau jewelry now in America, and probably one of the most important pieces of European Art Nouveau jewelry now in America. Philip Wolfers is not a household name and is not well known, but among jewelry historians and specialists of Art Nouveau, Philip Wolfers is a star. And he's really great as a designer, although he's known more for running the family shop called Wolfers Frere, situated in Brussels in the 19th and 20th centuries. He ended up becoming the head designer for the firm, although later on in his career, he decided to switch and work with jewelry. So he made about 130 unique pieces of jewelry. He didn't make them himself, he designed them, and he oversaw craftsmen make his designs. So this is one of 130 unique pieces. There's only one of a kind. And this is probably the largest piece. It's about 15 inches wide. And as you can see, the green leaves are enamel in a plique-à-jour technique, which means you can see through the enamel to the back of it. There's no gold frame. So it's like a stained glass window. And then the large white wisteria are opals, carved opals, and the pinkish wisteria is called watermelon tourmaline, again, carved by hand. And then the circular small round dots, if you will, are garnets. And at the top, you can see square-shaped red stones, which are rubies. And the whole thing moves. The French call it en trembleuse. And it means each of the sections move, and they were constructed to move, so it fit around the neck. And as I say, it's one of 30 as a close-up, and the quality is breathtaking. The execution is superb. And as you see, it's about 95% perfection. The condition is great. Made about 1900 and only came up at auction 5 or so years ago. And it really is a superb piece of jewelry. In the lower section, you can see the hallmark. It says X unique, which is the word for exemplaire unique, which means unique example, showing that it's one of these 130 unique example pieces of jewelry. And above it, at the top, you see WP, which is Philip Wolfers. So it's beautifully marked. And again, many of these unique pieces have been dismantled or lost or destroyed for the gems. So it's very rare to have a piece so intact. Wolfers really is, in my mind, one of the 3 or 4 greatest European Art Nouveau jewelers, the first being, of course, René Lalique. I just wanted to show you 3 other examples of his work. The necklace at the left of the screen with the opal was actually made by Philip Wolfers, and it was bought by his wife, who also had bought our choker when it was finished. Philip Wolfer's wife bought his best pieces to keep it in the family. And then in the center is this beautiful ivory figure brooch, and on the right is an enamel brooch as well. He's really one of the most inventive and superb jewelers of this period. We were very fortunate to acquire the choker. It had been exhibited at the Maastricht Art Fair near the border of Belgium and Holland. And we saw it in a dealer, a shop, and she had bought it from the auction house some years earlier, and it had been owned by the Wittemere Ducant family for 50 years or so. They were the biggest collectors of Art Nouveau in Belgium, jewelry, but they also had bought in the 50s to save the famous Victor Horta house called the Hotel Salvé, which is still in Brussels. I think it's still open to the public. Well worth your time to see it. So Philip Wolfers is a name that we needed to add to the collection because of his great work. The last piece that I wanted to talk about briefly is this ceramic wall basin. Now it looks small, but it's actually 5 feet tall and about 15 inches from the wall. So it's a massive, very heavy, very imposing piece of ceramic. It's glazed stoneware. Again, George Hunchal is not a well-known name, but in France at the turn of the last century, he's one of the greatest of the ceramicists or designers of ceramics. We're not certain if he simply designed this piece or actually made it as well. But George Hunchal is a ceramicist that any collection of Art Nouveau must have. And we, of course, were looking for his best pieces. I would say this is probably one of his 2 best pieces. It's in the form of a basin or a fountain. You can see at the bottom the shell form and the basin, and above it is the hippocampus, or this horse with fish legs, fish tails, and there are fish swimming around, and above the hippocampus are floral motifs or water forms or vegetal forms. The whole thing is about movement and Art Nouveau line, this curvilinear C and S scroll lines. And while the form is functional, it really was never made to be used. It was made to be a showpiece. In fact, I think we've got some details. There you see the hippocampus, this beautifully modeled, very dramatic sculptural tour de force. And you can, if you look hard, little fish and other forms you might find in the water. And this great aubergine, or this dark purple / brown glaze, magnificently crafted. There's the shell, and then below that is even another shell. And as I say, it comes out to about 15 inches. So it's very, very massive. It was made as a showpiece for the Paris World's Fair, the Exposition Universelle. And here is a photograph of the stoneware gallery or stoneware salon of the pavilion that Hunchel designed and paid for the Paris World's Fair in 1900. And in the center, you see either our basin or the other version, which is in a private collection. And these other three large vases designed by Hunchel. The vase at the left is 3 or 4 feet high. There's an example of it similar at the Metropolitan Museum. That and our piece are really among the most important pieces of French Art Nouveau pottery now in the United States. And what Hunchel is doing, as well as numerous artists at that time, they're looking to Japanese drip glaze and Japanese ceramics and pottery, stoneware particularly. Stoneware, as you know, is lower fired ceramic. Porcelain is a higher fired ceramic with a different body and different paste. And in fact, some of the other pieces that Hunchel designed are these 3 ceramic pieces. The vase at the right with the tall spout is at the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's about 17 inches tall. The vase in the center is that 3 or 4 foot vase made for the Paris World's Fair, like the example in the photograph we've just seen. This vase is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was originally one of 2, but the Metropolitan was only able to buy 1. And the vase at the left is another vase designed by Hunchel. These are all stoneware, and you can see he really cares about the glazes. So I'm thrilled that we were able to acquire this piece. I think we acquired it 2 months ago only, and we're presently having to devise a mount so that we can install the piece. As I say, it's very heavy. I call it the elephant on the wall because it's so massive and so big. But those are the 3 acquisitions we've made in the last 6 months I think, and I'm very pleased about them. Only one is on view at present, the choker, but the 2 others should be on view in the next months, hopefully within 6 months. But we're very excited about them because I think they add a dimension to the collection that I'm pleased about. So I think that's all I wanted to say about these. And if you had any questions, I'm certainly available to answer them.
That's great, Barry. Well, we do have quite a few questions. So thank you so much for providing that overview. Since we're talking about the work right now, let's go ahead and focus on this piece. There are quite a few questions. The first is, what is a hippocampus?
Well, the hippocampus, I think it's a mythological figure. There it is. It's a horse. You can see its legs. Can you see this pointer I'm using?
Yeah.
And then here you can see our fish legs. So it's a part fish and part horse.
That's
and
right.
I presume it's mythological.
Yep. Greek mythology, if my quick Wikipedia serves me.
What does it say?
Greek mythology.
Okay. Very unusual. And I think, I didn't mention it, but this whole form of basin is looking back to the mid-18th century Rococo style in France. And so I think it's really just about the curvilinear forms, and I don't know why the artist designed with the hippocampus, but obviously it's something to do with water.
Right, right. And so Barry, I know I asked you this when we were meeting prior to this talk, that this object is not functional. It will not be in the gallery, absolutely. But when it was made, when it was created, did it have function or was it purely decorative?
It's purely decorative because there is not only no spout, but I don't think there's a hole in the basin for anything. And it was never conceived to be used. It was always conceived to be a showpiece for that exhibition. In fact, it was not bought by anyone. And on the back is the inscription in black paint, Hunchel and his address. And it was in Mr. Hunchel's collection for decades. So it never sold initially, but it was a work of art to show off his design skills. And he chose to make a functional form, which of course is part of history. And in decorative arts, we often see works of art that are not functional. They're simply ornamental.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Barry, you've mentioned the size of this object, and that archival photograph that you showed us of it kind of in situ was so great. Could you tell us a little bit about the construction of the piece? Is it in separate parts, or is it all one piece of material?
I think the reason it's so heavy is because it's one solid piece of pottery, stoneware. I mean, it's so massive and so bulky. It took about 5 men to take out of the crate. There is a big hole, if you will, at the top in the back where you'd fit some mount. But no, it's one solid piece. And I presume it was crafted that way because there's no joints or areas on the back to suggest that it's 4 different pieces. But as I say, it really is a showpiece, and it was meant just for display.
Okay. Well, if we could go back to the choker, someone mentioned, are there any pictures of someone wearing it? It looks quite uncomfortable, according to this person. I know you mentioned that, all the pieces actually move, which maybe helps with that discomfort. But do you know if there are any pictures of people wearing it?
Well, there is actually. When Christie's auction house sold it, their staff put it on their neck. A woman from the staff put it on her neck. And I have the photograph in my files, but if anyone wanted to Google Wolfer's choker, you would probably find the photograph of this woman wearing it. And it looks perfectly normal as a choker. Today, we don't wear these things that much, but it did wrap around the neck, and it was quite big. I think it's about 5 inches tall, but that was the style of the day. And remember, it's probably in 10 or 12 sections, and they all conform to the shape of your neck. And it's piece of jewelry.
Yeah.
So yes, I can't say it's comfortable or not. I've never worn it.
Right. And it's odd to think about these objects that are in our galleries being worn, but that's good to know. Maybe a quick Google search can.
Yes, there is a picture. And if you Google Wolfer's choker, you should be able to find that image, which I thought was wonderful because it really gives you a sense of how these things looked. This one filled the neck. It was a very elaborate, complex piece of jewelry.
Yes, it's stunning. It's
Yeah.
reason number 1 to come to the museum for sure. And we have one more question going back to the terrine. I believe, Barry, you mentioned provenance of the object. Did you say that the Lewises owned it? I apologize. I might have misheard that.
Yes, the Lewises bought it in 1970 from Sotheby's London, an auction house, but they only bought the terrine. The day after the sale, someone contacted the auction house and made available the tray and the ladle, which was very strange that the set had become separated. But the Lewises bought that as well, owned this till about 2015. And then it went to a private collector. And then I saw it at a dealer in London. And I had wanted it because I had seen it in the Lewis's house. I had wanted it to display at our museum during the run of the Fabergé Reveal exhibition. And I saw it in March 2020 in London at the shop, and was thrilled because it's probably the most important piece of Moscow made Fabergé silver now in America. Bear in mind, Mr. Fabergé never made anything. He was just the head of the company. He oversaw the production. And this is, as I say, the most splendid piece of Moscow silver now in America. And it's very rare because much of this was melted down or destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure we're all grateful to know that it'll be on soon for us all to take a look at. One final question, Barry. We've gotten a couple of people pointing out that the birds on the tureen, are they possibly hybrids between swans and peacocks because of the long necks of maybe referring to a swan, but the feather detail definitely looks like peacocks. Could you maybe tell us how you arrived at peacock?
Well, I think the swan's heads are swans, mm-hmm. because the finial on the lid is a Cyrillic initials, which I think the swans refer perhaps to a wedding ceremony or a wedding celebration. And so I think those are swans. Not being a specialist, I agree that the feathers look like peacock feathers. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's fine to say peacock feathers or stylized peacock feathers. And it's just a decorative motif.
Right.
That was chosen for drama, as was the algae here.
Oh, wait.
What question, oops. I think these are porpoises or dolphins. I don't know the difference, but the dealer said porpoises, not sure. But yeah, those are probably peacock feathers. It's definitely a hybrid, but they're motifs. The other thing I should have mentioned, which I will now, is the lid is actually based on a muckamuck's cap or crown. It's a 17th century cap. And it's again based on this form that the warriors or rulers wore as a cap or a crown. Again, hearkening back to the 17th century. All of these motifs would have been immediately understandable to whoever looked at the tureen.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Barry. This was wonderful. That brought us right to 11:30, and just so much discussion in the chat box and the Q&A box about these objects. I have a feeling we'll see lots of visitors to the galleries to see these new objects. Everyone, like Barry mentioned, the choker is currently on view, and hopefully the basin and the tureen will join them in the coming months. So thank you all for joining us today. And Barry, thank you so much for your time and sharing your works with us. So thank you again, Barry, and I hope everyone has a great day.